Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us on Upfront in the Prophetic. Blessed that you are here. If this is your first time, please give a thumbs up, subscribe, as well as share this message. With us today, we have our dear friend Larry Ballard. And before I get him on live here, I wanted to just share something with you real quick. Um, we are in the midst of working out something for the National Guard that are heading over to the border, as well as for the other troops that are there, though those other patriots that are there. We're working on something, um, uh, and I'm really excited about it, and I'm hoping that you guys will be excited about it too. We've branded our own coffee, and it's Patriots Arise coffee. And what we want to do is we want to ship them cases of coffee, because I could just imagine, the energy that they need and the focus and so forth. So we want to be able to do that. So I'm going to be in the next couple of days putting up, not only are we working on our website, but a GoFundMe page, so that if you want to sew into that, into us shipping it, and then that would be awesome. And if you do that, I would love to have like a picture of you and a little statement so that we can send that off to them as well. Okay, so I'm pretty fired up about it. We're working with a couple people to get this done. And I think it's vital, honestly. And to know that they have our support and hear the messages from you across the country would be amazing. So just think about that. I'll be posting shortly. I'm hoping tomorrow, the next day, so that we can get started and get these guys some coffee. Amen. Come on, Patriots Arise coffee. They'll be fueled up. Hallelujah. So anyway, I'm excited about it, and it looks okay. So without further ado, let's get Larry on the line. Woohoo! On the broadcast. So excited. Excited about this message because it seems like lately, Larry, I mean, we're supposed to go to segment 4, okay? All right, but we're not, because I love how you're led. We're led by the Holy Spirit. And whatever the Lord wants to reveal, to warn, or to protect the people, you've got an ear, we've got an ear to hear, and he's giving you another message. So we'll get to 4 whenever we get to 4. But right now, we have another message that the Lord really wants those listeners, our family to listen to. So how are you today, my brother?
I'm good. The way things are coming down, there may not ever be a section 4, because what's happened is, as he's given me these new things, a little piece of 4 comes out, another little piece of 4, and before we're done, we may have already given 4. We just might not have called it segment 4.
Very
So let me to explain to the audience what's going on here. Last last show we did, I just got this one word: enigma, 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 enigma. And that led to the whole show that you saw, because I got up and then God just started pouring stuff out. Well, I was ready to do 4, and God gave me another. I mean, I love the way he gives me these cryptic messages. He
right.
can't tell me, the whole thing. He just says, warn them, warn them, warn them. I didn't even know what I was supposed to warn them about. And then I sat down and I started praying, and things started coming. And then over the next couple of days, things started happening. So basically, it's not necessarily reflected in the slides, but he gave me some downloads a few minutes ago. And I'm going to kind of give you an overview of what this thing is all about. Then we'll dive into the slides. So, what are we warning about? Well, it just happens that once I started thinking about warnings, something came to mind that you might think is totally out of my wheelhouse. And that is that on the 8th, I think it is, of April, yes, we have a repeat of a solar event that's going to create an X on New Madrid, which is the location of the strongest mainland earthquake in the United States of America. And God tells us that solar events are always telling us to be watchful. So I think God wants us to be cognizant of that, so that I'm working on my third book. It's just about ready to go out. And several of the chapters say, I tell you these things so that when they come to pass, you will believe. So if we have an earthquake soon, and if it's at New Madrid, what I think God wants us to say is, I work in marvelous, mysterious ways. I'm a supernatural God. And that earthquake would not be happening in a major metropolitan area that would cost thousands of people their lives, but it would be telling people, wake up, surrender, know that the things are coming, I'm in control. So the second part of that is that what were the rest of the warnings? So then I'm always looking for when the collapse is going to occur. Friend texts me a message and I find out that on March the 20th, there's a very significant meeting with the Fed. So we're going to talk about that. And then this morning I get up and when I find out that there have been cyber attacks, and you're talking about coffee for the people at the border. So there are the four things. I didn't know what they were going to be, but there they are. That's sort of woven into what we're talking about today. And so basically with that, let's kind of jump into this. I just needed, because it's going to be a little just jumbled if you don't know that before we get into the slides.
Sure. All right.
Okay. So God's warning his people. Let's move on.
Okay. Oops,
And
sorry.
there we go. That's good. I mean, they've seen this. If they're watching, they've seen this before.
But
The
for
only
the
thing I
new
guess I would
people,
say is I think the time is getting urgent now, folks. And I really, really urge you. You need to have more than superficial information. And even the videos I do, it's not like sitting down, reading a book and highlighting it and having it to refer back to. So this all started way back in 17 with when a solar eclipse came across the United States and crossed New Madrid. And now we have coming up on April the 8th, a repeat, and it's going to cross that point. Now, why is that X that is created important? Go to the next slide and I'll try to start to show you. That X, New Madrid, where I put that X, is just a very short distance from the Mississippi River. And this earthquake was in 1811. And at the time, it was the largest earthquake in all of America. Since then, there's been one this one was 8.2. There's been one in Alaska that was 9.2. But this earthquake zone is different than any in the entire world. Now, keep in mind the path of the Mississippi River when we go to the next slide, and I'll kind of share with you if this thing erupts, what's going to happen. Let's go to the next slide. So why is it uniquely different? What you're seeing in that middle is an area that was pretty much decimated by a sand geyser. And that picture is trying to show you what's going on. Basically, water over eons sips down below the bed of the Mississippi River, has created a literal sea of mud, water, and coal. And when this earthquake happens, think about an earthquake in the ocean. What does it create? A tsunami, right? Now think about a tsunami happening underground and there's no place for that wave to go. Think about the tremendous pressure that it builds up. And so it causes these geysers. Now, the picture to the right is geysers, eruptions, sand geysers, but they didn't have somebody standing there in 1811 taking pictures. So this is actually taken from a planet in the solar system. But that's what happens when New Madrid pops. It is so powerful because there's no place for the energy to go. And so that wave just goes like that, and eventually it pops up these sand geysers. So now let's look at what happens with the path. Can you go back? Is it possible to go back a slide?
yeah, sure.
Can you do that? All right, we're at the Mississippi River. So here's what happened the last time this went off. I'm here in Branson. We didn't hardly get damaged at all, even though we're not all that far away, because of the rolling hills, or if you want to call them mountains, that broke up that wave. And basically, the time it got to us, it really didn't do a lot of damage. But if you happen to live along the Mississippi River, I'm warning those people along the Mississippi River. I'm not saying this thing is going to pop. I'm not saying it's going to pop on the 8th. I'm just saying, just be aware. What it did is it went down the Mississippi River channel, and it got the bigger cities for about a 300-mile radius. And that would be what, Memphis, I think, is within that range. And then I used to live in St. Louis, and it got St. Louis, Missouri. And I want you to see what it did because of that tsunami. It instantaneously raised the level of the Mississippi River to the point that it took boats that were on the Mississippi River and cast them onto the shore, just like a normal tsunami would do. And if they go on, keep forwarding now, this 2 more slides, go forward again.
Oh, you want to go
One
up?
more, one
Oh.
more. Oh, I guess I didn't put it in. There's supposed to be a picture of Horseshoe Lake. Can you go back? I'm sure it was in there. Go up one.
Okay.
Maybe it's up. Go up one
Okay.
more. All right, I guess I left it out. Anyway, there's a picture of Horseshoe Lake, and that is a lake, and you can see from the lake across the Mississippi River, and you can see the arches in St. Louis, St. Louis. So that was 300 miles away from the epicenter of that quake. And it was so powerful that it caused the Mississippi River to flow backwards and change the channel of the Mississippi River. So this is no little quake zone that we're talking about. So I just want to warn people that if we look at our Bible, it's just possible that this thing could be getting ready to pop soon. And if it does, God's warning us that what we need to do is we need to surrender to him. Anything that happens that's coming right now, that's some kind of an attack on us, is a warning to us to surrender, to kneel down and surrender to God. Let's move forward and we'll get into the real meat and gravy.
Okay, I'd like to also mention too that many of you may have experienced this earlier this morning in regards to your cell phones not working, right?
Mhm.
And honestly, I mean, they're all back on again, but I believe that this is just my opinion, Larry, I believe that they're testing what they can do in
Mhm.
regards to the communication. I'm trying to find a good service in regards to a satellite phone, what's most recommended, so we can share it with our listeners. But these are pivotal times right now, critical times, and we must be aware, have an ear to hear our Father, because this is like a verily, verily time. You know, in the Bible, when he would say, "Verily, verily, I say unto you," this is a wake up call.
Yes, and as we talked before we got onto the show, basically there were 4 things that God said, tell them about, wake them up. New Madrid was one. And the next was the meeting that's coming up with the feds on March the 20th, where they're going to try to put a stake in the ground that says when the financial collapse comes, hey, it's not the Fed's fault, it's China's fault. We'll talk about that. And then, like I said, I got up this morning and I encountered the very same thing you did. I found out about the cyber attacks, and then you mentioned your coffee. And basically, that then is another attack. That's terrorist attack that can come from a border. So we're watching out for all 4 of those kinds of events. And that's what this presentation, at least in part, is warning us of. Let's go on down and get into the real meat here. So keep going. All right, keep going. God's going to tell us who the enemy is. Now, there's pieces of other presentations that are thrown in here. We've already determined, we know who it is. It's the shadow government, and our politicians are just the front man for that global financial system in the shadow government. Let's go on.
Okay.
Now here, we had several slides that depicted what I've now depicted in this one slide, but this is crucial. We really need to understand who the enemy is, and we need to understand that right now, America is intricately involved with the G7, which is part and parcel of this combination B. So I'm going to spell this out for you in detail, and I want you to really pay attention and maybe even take a note or two. So basically what we've got here is the head of the beast, if you will, is the Holy Roman Empire. And that is the combination of the lady sitting on the beast which is the dragon, and that dragon is the Holy Roman Empire, which is the combination, as we discussed in Daniel, of the formation of the Catholic Church and the Roman Empire, which was revived in 1989 when the fourth head was put back on the leopard. So for those who watched the last show, you'll know what we're talking about. But within that Holy Roman Empire, there's some entities we need to be cognizant of that have to collapse. The central banking system has to collapse. The UN has to collapse, and all the global governance organizations under it have to collapse. And then we need to recognize that England is one of the most evil entities in the world. There's a slide where we'll get into detail on that. And Germany, we talked about how they, except for several miracles that happened in World War II, they should have won that war hands down. But basically, God intervened. So God is a waymaker. God is a protection. America is under God's covenant. So maybe it makes sense to go back and review what those miracles were. So we go back and we look at how America was forged and protected. And we start way back with the invasion of Spain, with King Philip invading England. And we had the miracle of the raging sea, where a hurricane came up and sunk all the Spanish Armada. And then we come to World War II, and we go to Dunkirk, and America has not yet entered the war. There are 38,000 troops with their back up against the English Channel within 3 days of being forced to surrender, and a fog rolls over France. The Air Force is grounded, and Churchill asked for anybody who's got a boat to come rescue. 1,000 boats came, little ships, every kind of boat you can imagine, and they rescued 338,000 men who lived to fight and went on to win the war. And then we talked about Enigma, which was what basically led to that whole show. And that was an encryption machine, a cipher machine that the Germans had developed. And we had no weaponry that was superior to the Germans. Their airplanes were superior. They had the V1 rocket, which was basically the precursor to what we call a cruise missile today. They had submarines that were in wolf packs, and basically on 3 or 4 different occasions, we were with inches of winning the war. And then that Enigma machine created a code that for every character you typed on a typewriter, it could have one of 150 million options as to what came out. So the one thing, more than anything, that saved the Allied forces is they broke that code. And they kept it a secret from the Germans. So during the entire war, imagine if you had the enemy's playbook, they knew every battle they were going to do, every placement of every troop. They kept it quiet, they kept it secret, and that is why we won. Without that, we would have lost. And then there's one other miracle that God did. There was a technician at Bell Labs, and he was working on something that had to do with phones called a potentiometer, and he had a dream. He had no military training, nothing, but he woke up in the morning and he had it. And it was a device that allowed them to use electronics to target the superior Air Force and the V1 missiles. And all of a sudden, Britain was no longer at the mercy of the air superiority of Germany. So let's move on. So I just want you to recognize this is the system that we're up against. And then Francine, last time we had, I don't know if it was this slide or one similar to it, and you pointed out something. And so I went and blew it up on my computer. And yes, exactly what you said is true. If you folks pull this picture up and you go to the left-hand side, you're going to see skeletons, you're going to see demons. So basically, I urge you to go on your computer, look this picture up, and then ask yourself, what is a supposedly religious entity doing with these kind of demonic images in their church? The Catholic Church is Mystery Babylon, along with the Roman Empire. They are enemy number one, and we need to absolutely understand that. Let's move on. Okay, so now we're going to get into some details of what we got to do. England is America's mortal enemy. And yet we think of England as being our friend. So I want to spell out 5 things here that basically tell you emphatically that England is our enemy. Hold on, I just advanced my computer and I want to go back. You may have to cut this out, I apologize.
That's okay.
All right. So they inflicted the world with the British free trade slavery system, which is the system that has allowed them to have a government, a shadow government that has controlled the world, not only America, but the entire world. And they inflicted the world with the global central banking system. What they do is cause a war. They would bankrupt the participants of the war and then force them to take on a central banking system. What else they did? America fought what? The Revolutionary War, because we didn't want one of their central banks. It looked like ostensibly we won the war, but before we were even out of the first term of Washington, we went bankrupt and had to accept a central bank. Then in 1811, the charter expired. And what happened? We said, we're not going to renew it. And the British said, we're going to take you back to colonial status. We fought the War of 1812, also called the Second American Revolutionary War, and it looked like we won again. And what happened? We went bankrupt again. And what happened? We went back under their central banking system again. So they've controlled us from the very beginning. In the midst of that, something I did mention was 1913 when they got the third central bank, which we're still under. And then what happened is America at around the time of this of World War One had become the world's wealthiest, most powerful nation. We had invented the transcontinental railroad system and the Industrial Revolution, and Europe was adopting both technologies. And there was a plan to connect every continent in the world except Australia, which is, of course, an island, by rail. And what was that going to do? Put your heads around this, folks. That was going to crush the control of England, who is the head of the global financial system, because they were going to lose control of trade by sea. So they orchestrated over a 24-year period World War One, killed 15 million people. And now think about this. The oppression that they inflicted on Germany is what caused World War II. So basically, every war America has been in has been precipitated on us by the country that birthed us. England is America's greatest enemy. And we need to come to grips with that and understand that, because they're the ones that are calling the shots for the global financial elite. They and the Vatican are the ones who control the central banking system of the world. So let's go on. I just need to punctuate that so we know who and what we're dealing with. And my computer is once again not cooperating. All right, here we go. So the entities that must be removed. If you're going to defeat an enemy, you got to know who he is, and you got to know what his weaknesses are and what strategic things you have to take out in order that he is defeated, not just wounded, but defeated. So this is very simple. We have to take out the global central banking system. And that's going to take care of itself, because one of the things that's coming up when we start to talk about this possible financial collapse, it's of an order of magnitude greater than anything we've ever seen. Well, I'll save that, the description of that until we get to the right slide. But we've got to get rid of the UN and their global governance organizations, which control us, and that includes NATO, and that includes the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, all of the entities that are part of the UN. And what is it the UN stands for? They want to end all sovereign nations and impose a one world government and a 10-nation trading bloc that will usher in the beast system that says who can trade and who cannot trade, who can buy, who can sell, effectively who starves and who doesn't. And then the corrupt CEOs and the corrupt politicians in every government in the world have to be taken out wholesale. And there's a way that God has provided that we do that. And then the Foreign Relations Trilateral Commission, World Economic Forum, Davos, Illuminati, all of those organizations and more have to be utterly and completely taken out. If we don't do those things, the beast system will just come back before you know it, especially if we don't take out the banking system completely. All right, let's go on. Now, how do we take them out? That's divulged in the next slide.
Well, I want to
Yeah,
mention
it's,
something real
oh,
quick.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
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 please.
no worries.
We just lost you. There you are.
Okay, here we are. Just mentioned not too long ago, back in 2023, there was a movie done called Cyber Attack.
Mm.
Okay. Watch it. It's very, very interesting because it shows a lot of things. And get this, Senator Rubio from Florida warns, okay, this just came out, warns that cyber attack will be 100 times worse than AT&T outage and the rest of the outages from the other phone companies. He believes that China will hit your power, your water, and your bank account. This is what Mario Rubio says. So things are happening, guys. We've been saying, and Larry's been saying for a long time now about being prepared. Now the Lord is giving a warning here, and Larry is showing what this warning contains and why. So I just wanted to mention that. So we'll go to the next slide.
All right, thank you. So basically, God gives us, he tells us right in his Bible, if a thief steals something, he has to give it back. And in our own Constitution, we say if you're convicted of treason, if you're convicted of racketeering, if you do things that are illegal, we have a way to take that money away from you. We confiscate your assets. And so, as we've talked about, we're under an illegally imposed corporation. All of our governors, all of our senators, all of our congressmen, our presidents, all of these people are all in office unconstitutionally. And so basically, when this comes down, we can take them out in one fell swoop. We can get back our Constitution. We can get rid of the 2,700 plus page Constitution that they have filled with laws that are designed to create a legal dictatorship. And we can pass new laws and have a new tax system. And as Trump said, you'll file your taxes on a postcard. And basically, this is a foreshadow. God has given us a way to get back everything in one felled swoop. Let's go on.
Amen.
So let's skip past this. So what we're going to do now is talk about a couple of slides we've seen, but it's imperative we understand that wars have different points in them that have different degrees of urgency. So when you start out, everybody's feeling one another out, but towards the end, it's absolute life or death. And where we're at right now is where Sun Tzu says we're on death ground. So we talked about this before with the British, and the British basically took control of the world and got control of 75% of the land of the world. And then they used America, ceded us on some power so we could be used to protect their land. So we became the police force of the world. And then they said, oh, America's getting too strong. And so they wanted to cede power to China so they could create a super capitalist communist society. But now we're on death ground. And this is what we need to focus on. This is their kill shot. And if they're successful, America is done, never to come back. Well, they're not going to be, because God has already shown us that he's a way maker and he's making a way for us, just like he has in the past. But we need to know how serious what's coming down right now is. So let's go to the next slide. And I want you to see that their whole strategy has changed because we're on that death ground. Think about, for those of you who are older like me, think about what they've done to us over the last several decades. They push us and push us. And the minute we saw what they were doing and began to resist, they back off. And then we'd forget about what they'd done. And life went on as normal, and push again and pull and push and pull. But now what's happened? Once Donald Trump got elected, interrupted their time cycle. They had planned for Obama to come in and drive the nation into debt. And under Obama's term in office, he inflicted us with more debt than the 43 presidents that preceded him. Then Hillary was supposed to come in and finish it. But when Trump got in, it disrupted their plans. And what they've done now is going to prove to be their fatal error. They're pushing, pushing, pushing as hard as they can. No back off. They just feel like they absolutely have to collapse things. And what that's doing is it's waking us up. It's making the people stand back and say, oh my God, look what they're doing to us. They really do want to kill us. They really do want to end the sovereignty of every nation in the world. And so America and the people of the world are going to stand up because of the mistakes that they've made. Let's go to the next slide. And we'll look at how the reset is not going to happen the way they said. It's going to happen the way God says. And this slide we've seen before, but I think in this context, we need to review it. So the global economy will collapse, and it'll collapse very, very fast. And when that happens, they'll lose control of the money, and whistleblowers will come out, and our eyes are going to be like saucers as we recognize what they've really done to us. And because of the magnitude of this collapse, which we'll get into in another slide, it's not going to be like before where it collapses and then we bail them out. We don't have any money to bail them out. All the governments of the world have maxed out on the amount of debt that they can take. And almost every nation in the world has more debt now than their GDP is. And so when this collapse comes down, whole nations are going to collapse. Britain and Japan are on the brink of collapse right now as we speak. And also blue chip corporations around the world are going to collapse. And that's going to create exactly what we want. It's going to collapse that global financial system, and the American Republic will be restored. And then now, as we go through this, we have to find out how we lost it and how we're going to keep it once we get it back. So let's go on. So we need to understand something that I don't think most people understand, and that is the '08 collapse and the soon to come 2024 collapse. How did it happen and how big is it? So I need you to have a little history with me here. The '08 collapse would never have happened had it not been for three specific traders. Obama, who had just come out of college, who had graduated Harvard as a constitutional lawyer, sues Citibank, wins, and all of a sudden it was based upon what they call redlining, which is discrimination against economically depressed areas, i.e. supposedly black areas. And all of a sudden we were inflicted with the predatory lending laws that said, you can buy a house with no money down and no income verification and at 1 or 2% interest. That was the basis for the predatory lending. But there was a catch, and that catch is also embedded in the collapse that's going to come soon. A normal 20% mortgage, and I know what I'm talking about, folks, because I was a real estate agent, eventually a broker, and eventually owned my own firm. So I know from experience what I'm about to tell you. So basically, a normal 20% down loan is 15% typically, 15 years, 30 years, and it's at a fixed rate. So if you lock in, I don't care if inflation happens, whatever, your interest rate's never going to go up. But all those predatory loans, they were the trigger to collapse. What they were was they were variable rate loans. Most of them were 3 years. And so they had a timeline, they had a switch. We can flip that switch 3 years out and bam, we're going to collapse the market. So that was the landmine that they put in this. Then you've got the Glass-Steagall Acts, which was signed by none other than Slick Billy. And what did that do? That said, for the first time in history, we could have banks that were too big to fail. And the minute it was passed, JP Morgan passed the largest bank merger in the history of the world. And what happened when we had the collapse? We had what? The largest stimulus bill ever passed, $700 billion that we were inflicted with. And we were told if we don't sign that bill within 24 hours, there'd be martial law. Now, it was only 2,000 pages long, folks. So I am absolutely confident that they wrote that over the weekend. There's no way in the world they knew ahead of time and had a whole flotilla of lawyers writing that for maybe a year, you think? So basically they lied to us and they lied to us. And then comes Bush Jr. And he had the most heinous rule of all, because the governor of Georgia had been a bank executive before he became governor, and he had passed a piece of legislation in Georgia that was protecting Georgians against the predatory lending practices. And every governor in the state said, man, we got to do that. And Bush put a whole army of lawyers on a plane, sent them to Georgia, got that bill revoked, and passed other legislation that says that the sole purview for that type of predatory lending legislation resides with the federal government. And then all he had to do is sit back and do nothing. And so Obama, Clinton, and Bush orchestrated the financial collapse of '08, but they didn't do it without some additional help. The rating companies made a fortune by taking those subprime loans, those collateralized debt obligations, and giving them triple A ratings so that it now became not something that just related to the United States, but the entire world. And all they had to do was wait for this variable rate mortgages to trigger. And then all they had to do is dry up the credit. So there was no recourse for those poor people, and millions of Americans and millions of people all over the world lost their homes. They are heinous, evil beyond imagination.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, unfortunately, we were a part of that in 2008, and we lost our home, and um, just horrible, horrible.
I lost 1.85 million in that debacle. So I made sure I knew what caused it and how it happened. So if we go on down, we're going to drill down, and I want you to see, you can go on past this to the next one. You can stop there. I want people to understand how this happened, because what I want to do is take away any chance that they have to make excuses and say, oh, we didn't know, we didn't do it, it was beyond our control, beyond our purview. Bull crap. I'm going to show you exactly what happened. So I'm going to kind of read these so that we absolutely have the detail. So once deposited, I don't know if people realize that when you set up a banking account, that money is no longer yours. It is owned by the bank, not you. So that's important. And then we have the fractional banking system, where this is, oh, banks, you better keep 10% on hand in case there are withdrawals so that we don't have a run. But then in COVID, they said, oh, things are so bad, we're going to waive that. So banks all of a sudden didn't have to have any reserve. Now, if that doesn't set you up for a bank collapse, I don't know what would. And then we came along after 08, and oh, we're going to give you some protections. We're going to pass the Dodd-Bill Act, and we're no longer going to bail people out at your expense. So what happens? Along comes Silicon Valley, and oh, wait a minute, what did they do? They bailed them out. So you think maybe they lied to us? And then in the Dodd-Bill Act, they said they're going to do something that most Americans have no idea what it was. They're going to do bail-ins in the event of another collapse. Well, you have to go way back, probably almost 20 years, to Greece to find out what that really means. Greece's economy collapsed, and what Greece's government did is it said, hey, folks, it's important that we save our government. So what we're going to do is we're going to take money out of your bank accounts and use it to float us. And so in the instance of us now, we have the Federal Discount Insurance Company, and you're supposed to be protected under up to $250,000. So what that says is, effectively, if you're a company and you've got to keep that kind of money in there to pay your payroll and ongoing expenses, so say you've got $400,000. Anything above $250,000 belongs to the bank. They're going to use that. But wait, it gets worse. It gets worse. Because if you're an insurance company, you need assets to protect what you're insuring, right? So guess what? The FDIC is owned by the very private entities that own the central banking system. And guess what? Do they have 50% in reserve to handle withdrawals? No. Do they have 25%? No. Do they have 10%? No. They have 1%. 1%. So when we had the little financial collapse in 08, they had a shortfall of $700 billion that we were on the hook for. And what's coming is astronomically greater than that, folks. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to break it down. And what I'm going to do is take away any hope that they can have an excuse to say, oh, we didn't do it. We didn't know about it. We were caught with our britches down. These people make their living and their trillions running bank scams. So if you think they don't know what they were doing, think again. I'm going to walk you through it. So we start with COVID, and COVID was the excuse to print an unparalleled amount of money, driving every nation in the world to the brink of bankruptcy. They could accept no more debt. And so what does that do? You know what that has to do. That has to create what? Inflation. So it was automatically built into the equation that we would have inflation. And then what does inflation do? Well, wait a minute, we got to go back and find they laid another landmine. So what they were telling us was they told the banks around the world is, we've had low interest rates for almost 10 years now. So basically you can get a mortgage for 2 or 3%, and we're going to keep it that way. But now all of a sudden, what? They were having inflation, and the Fed was meeting and raising rates constantly. And so what happened is those people who had their money invested in low interest things in the stock and in the real estate market said, wait a minute, we're losing money, actually not making money, losing money, keeping our money in the bank. And so they started to pull it. So what did that lead to? Withdrawals. And if you don't have any reserves or at the max 10%, what's that going to lead to? That's going to lead to bank failures. Is all part of the equation. And then if you've only got 1% of the money that you need for what you're covering, it leads to a catastrophic financial collapse. It was all planned, folks. Every bit of it was planned and orchestrated to create the demise. And Francine suffered, and I lost $1.85 million, and there are millions of Americans who suffered. So you need to be aware they're doing it to us again. So if
Yeah.
you'll go to the next slide, we're going to go a little deeper into this, because I don't want to leave any excuses out there for them to say, oh, we didn't know. So this is the Fed knew slide. The Fed knew liquidity problems would cause what? A collapse of the dollar. And then now, guess what? It just so happens that along with that, that's what's happening in the banking industry, we get the birth of what? BRICS. We're going to talk about that in a second, but that also plays into this because that is assuring the collapse of the US dollar. And then the Fed is not telling us, the public, that they plan to steal our money. That's what the bail-ins, they did, so basically they're going to take your money, period. And then the Fed knows that the collapse of the dollar will lead to what? The forced reset that they want. So it's all planned. It's all planned. So let me stop here. I see you shaking your head. Do you have any comments you want to make?
Yeah, it's been planned since, I mean, my gosh, decades. If you look up, Jekyll Island, you'll be able, if you get the book, it's just amazing, all this information that, and how they planned this from what, 1933, I believe. And I mean, it's really deep. And a lot, and Alan and I are not financial advisors or anything, but I would suggest that, people look into getting into silver. Silver is affordable now. And even if you were able to purchase one, American Eagle a month, is so worth it, because that's real money. The Bible talks about, the gold and silver are mine, the precious metals are his, and that's God's kingdom. What we're hearing right now through Larry is man's kingdom. And like he said, it's got to come down. Now, I do have a site that you can purchase the silver or even gold if you so choose. That's below, and it's a great company at cost. So yeah, I just wanted to share that because I mean, this is evil, demonic, devising, planning, scheming for years. And let's get the people dependent on us. Let's tank America and a one world government, like you said, through the UN. I mean, oh my gosh, it just goes on and on. However, God, hallelujah, he's the answer, right? Praise the Lord.
Right. All right. Well, let's jump onto this slide then. This goes back to the banking thing, and I just want you to know it's absolutely guaranteed that they plan on collapsing China, and they're doing that by taking trade away from them. And China is having some real problems, but we're going to get into that in a minute. Right here, I just want to focus on what they're doing to the dollar. So basically, when when you go out to buy oil and you're a major country now and you're going to buy millions of barrels with our inflation going on like we have, do you want to buy it in a devaluing dollar that may soon be worthless? Or do you want to buy it in a currency backed by gold and silver? So basically, BRICS is going to absolutely, because no way other than the fact it's going to take the dollar down the tubes, and the dollar is going to basically degrade into almost nothing. But that, don't fear, folks. There's a way that that's going to work in our best interest. It has to happen. We can talk about that a little later on in this presentation. Let's go to the next slide. So this is what's got to happen, and it's happening as we speak. So let's talk a little bit about China. So China's stock market has been drastically declining. They're losing manufacturers, and basically the economy is in trouble. But here's where we need to stop and think about what's going on in terms of the financial collapse that's imminently going to happen, what I call the 2024 collapse, and that meeting that's coming up on the 20th. Here's what the Fed is positioning us. This is their excuse for they didn't do it. So because of the financial problems that China is having, they're basically stimulating their economy. And when they stimulate their economy, here's what the Fed is saying. Oh, well, we were thinking on the 20th of lowering interest rates, and I'll tell you in a minute why that's so important. But if China is stimulating their economy, that's going to drive money to China, and it may prevent us from lowering rates. So just be cognizant of that. I'm not saying what's going to happen, but we'll talk about that a little more detail in a minute. And then we know the dollar's got to fall. So when both of those nations fall, that is large enough to collapse the entire global financial system. And in other presentations we've talked about, there's no other nation in the world that can bring us out of that vacuum other than the United States. So let's move on. And we're going to talk about the March 20th event and the details of that. So basically on the March 20th, the Fed is meeting, and here's why it's important. They're going to make a decision. Are we going to lower interest rates? So let's go back pre-COVID, and you can buy a house, and probably the average mortgage interest rate was around 3%. Well, now it's 6 or 7%. Well, here's what's happened. The residential market hasn't really suffered like last time, because we didn't have those predatory lending loans out there. The market has slowed down, and they're not selling as much, but there's not that debt burden out there that you had from that trigger that you had in 08. So it's relatively stable. However, commercial loans are different than residential loans. They're typically not 30-year loans at fixed rates. They're typically just like the predatory lending loans were. They're usually 5-year terms, variable rate, renewed every 5 years. And so when we had 08 and we had the collateralized debt obligation, there was I think 400 billion. I think it's in one of the other slides. I may be wrong, 400 billion. And now what we're on the hook for here with the commercial market is $1.5 trillion. So if the commercial market collapses, my comment here is that that is potentially large enough to trigger this collapse. So this event coming on March the 20th, I'm not saying it's going to collapse it, but I'm saying depending on what they do, it could be something that we need to watch as a potential trigger.
Yeah.
So let's go on. Oh, there's my number. It was in the next slide.
Was it?
So I can see if I was right. So in
Okay.
2008, the collateralized debt obligation was 400 billion.
Yep.
And now the liability that we have is $1.5 trillion. And that is another kind of earthquake. That's an economic earthquake.
Yes.
And they're going to blame it on China if they can. They're going to say, those red commies, they stimulated their economy and they caused this collapse because then we couldn't lower the interest rates like we planned it. Oh, it's not our fault. They set everything up so they can always have plausible deniability. So I want to give you an example of the impact that BRICS is already having. This is just one example. Back in 2022, Russia, before we started really heavily sanctioning them, 50% of all their international transactions were conducted in US dollars. And today it's 13%. And nations around the world are leaving the dollar by the droves. So I ask you this question: how, under those circumstances, can it be anything other than as plain as the nose on your face that the US has already lost its status as world's reserve currency, and the dollar is going to absolutely go into a position where it's virtually worthless? It's coming, folks. It's going to be like the Weimar Republic. But the good news is it's not going to last too long, and God's got a plan to restore the economy, but he has to kill the beast system in order to do it. So maybe this is a good place for me to stop and say, Francine, do you have questions on this? This is intimidating what I've just said.
Yeah, absolutely. The previous slide just reminded me of um, Alan and I. We had this conversation, and we really felt strong back in November that this March, would be a pivotal month. And from your slides, we're not saying that it is, but it sure kind of looks like it.
Yeah, I don't claim God gives me dates. I just claim that I'm a historian and I follow late breaking news, and I basically go back and connect the dots, and I can see when something's happening that it could potentially be a trigger point.
Right.
And so basically, maybe to give that a little more credence, what we're already seeing in the commercial market. Think about this. They've bolstered the stock market so that they have a way to say to us, oh, folks, the Biden administration is doing a good job. Everything's okay, but it's not okay. There's unemployment that's rampant. And what's happening is we've got commercial properties that are sitting vacant. And in face of that, they can't afford to have a situation occurs where one day they're paying 3% and they have a piece of property that's already vacant, and tomorrow it's going to be 6 or 7%. They'll be forced to walk away. And when they do, that will trigger something absolutely synonymous with what happened in '08. The only difference was in '08, it was the residential market, and this time it's going to be the commercial market. They're not smart enough to ever come up with a different plan. So once you see what they've done, once you can figure it out if you just pay attention. So let's go on down. We'll skip down 2 slides. We can just go through that. Here's how I want to stop. This is a way more important slide than you might think. We took our eyes off the ball, and that's got us to where we are. So God created a nation that was absolutely unique, and he called it a republic. And when Benjamin Franklin left the Congressional Convention, he was asked basically, ma'am, what form of government have you given us? And he responded, a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. And what is a republic? A republic is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And that was what we were given, and we had to basically protect it. And so with it, it would create peace and harmony, because it created a situation that equalized and elevated the condition of all mankind. But we've lost it, and over time, we became a democracy. We had another bankruptcy. And we lost our democracy, and we became what our forefathers called a mobocracy, which is rule of the masses, where once the people least willing and least able to work figure out they can get handouts from the coffers, it's just a matter of time till we get to where we are right now, to where we're on the brink of financial collapse. And what they've done is they divided us. Oh, the haves and the have-nots. Well, let me tell you, folks, the only people that have enough money to make any difference are the global financial elite. All of us are hurting right now with what's going on. So what I'm leading up to with this slide is that we need to understand that when this system falls, we better go back and restore a republic and all the principles that are around it. We better give power back to God. And so that's where this thing is going to start to wrap up. Let's go to the next slide. So let's review what a republic is. A republic it absolutely has to have a moral public. So it has to be based on what? The Bible. So what did our founders say? Our government was based not on the laws of man, but on the 10 commandments of God. You had to have an educated people. so they knew what they were voting for. And so they could read the Bible. They had to be informed. So we didn't have the lying media. We had pamphleteers who actually printed the truth and disseminated so the people could know what was really going on in their government. And the people basically had freedom of speech, and they could meet and congregate and talk. And when they got ready to make the vote, they could vote for, because they were a moral people, a godly people, and because they understood what a republic was, they would vote not based upon vested interest, but what was in the best interest of the nation as a whole. And so then we go down and we see, well, where have we gone to? Matthew 22, 36 through 40. And what's happening there is the Sadducees and Pharisees are asking Christ, what is the most important thing in the Bible? Love thy Lord, thy God with all thy heart and all thy soul and all thy might. And what's number two? Love thy neighbor as yourself. We haven't done that. The church was set up to take care of the poor, the indigent, so forth. We have abandoned that, and we better darn well go back to it. That's all I got to say. If we don't, we will not be able to restore our republic, and God will not bless us.
That's so true.
We can go on, but I think maybe you might have a comment on that.
No,
Yes, no, maybe?
no, I'm good. I'm good.
All right. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I put it up here so that you can stop and freeze your screen and read the whole biblical scripture. I'm just going to make it simple for you. So basically, we go down to the line that's underlined. Here's what happens: is God made us prosperous. He promised us that we were under Abraham's covenant. We would be blessed and we'd be a blessing to the world. But when he blessed us, we were supposed to remember that what? It was by God's hand that we got it. So by my power and by the might of mine hand have I gotten thine wealth. So we forgot. We forgot. We didn't become stewards of God. We squandered the money. We went off and spent it on all kinds of unrighteous things. And God says, when I restore you, you better do what I tell you to do. You better give me the glory. You better take care of the widows and the indigent and so forth. Because if you don't, then there's the opposite side of those blessings, which are the curses, which are also enumerated in the Bible. So I'm just telling you, when we get this back, we had better surrender to God, create our constitution back again based upon what? The 10 commandments of God. And this next slide, we're just about wrapped up. I think there's only one or two more slides. I want you to understand, I don't care what they're telling you. It's easy. Once we wake up, stand up and see who the enemy is and stand united, it's so easy to take them down. So this chart, this graph, basically, I had it up last time and I thought it was a perfect way to tell you how vulnerable they are. Once they lose their money, they've lost the power. So right now they're in the process of losing their democracy, quote, mobocracy, because we're in the process of restoring our republic, a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And globalization is automatically, as we speak, being turned into deglobalization, which makes it difficult for them to control us. They're losing their fiat currency. We're going to God's economic system based on gold and silver, and their oppressive taxes are going to be taken away from them. And we're going to have a simple sales tax, which is what we had when this nation was founded. And their free trade system is already going away. When Trump was in, he took us out from under the intentionally losing NAFTA and put us under fair trade and our open borders, folks. You wait. When Trump comes back, the first thing he's going to do is close those borders and get those people that have come in here out of here. And I can go through the whole list, but I'll just let you read it. But what I want you to see is everything is a continuum. If we know what the dark side is, what they've done to us, all we have to do is ask what the opposite is. We have their playbook in this one slide. We have the answer to how to defeat the enemy and get our nation back. And with that, that is the end. That's a wrap. There we are back at my book. So do you have any closing comments you want to make?
Well, God has been preparing us all this time, and in order for us to get to the point to where our dependence is not on our government, but on Yeshua, Jesus Christ, these things must happen. And as always, Larry, I so enjoy just what God has placed on your heart and then bringing it out because a lot of people their gift is to hear, and if they hear they get it, but most people like to see, and you've produced these awesome presentations for people to really grasp, and not only grasp the visuals but to hear the audio of you explaining it as well. So we thank you for doing that. It really means a lot. And I believe that it's pivotal for this time, that you have been on our broadcast. And I feel, and so does Alan, so honored and blessed that God, put you in our lives to share this with the people, because that's our heart. It's always been our heart that, we want to educate the people, get them prepared in all areas, but the main thing too is that for those that don't know Jesus, and to come by listening to these broadcasts, they come to know God's plan for humanity and for them personally. So it really does mean a lot, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And you hit on the essence of these. What God told me when I had my near-death experience way back in '68, the truth will set you free. So what I'm supposed to do, I have a very unique approach. It goes beyond the slides. Basically, there are people out there that report on late breaking news cycles, but I use history. But not just history. I use the Bible, and it's estimated that 70% of the Bible is history. And then I tie that to real world history, and then I connect the dots so I can go back and look at the past. I can look at how things change over time. I can come to the present, and then I can say I now have patterns that are very, very replicable, and I can make reasonable predictions as to where we're going. So that closes me by taking us to what we talked about in this segment as far as the banking system. I
Yes.
want people maybe to go back and look at those 3 or 4 slides on the banking system and understand, don't let these people make any excuses. This is planned. This is orchestrated. And what God is doing by taking us out from under the system and putting us on a financial system, God's system, based upon gold and silver, where God says, all the cattle on 1,000 hills are mine, all the natural resources are mine. We are going to take away, or God is going to make provision for once this collapses, for us to get back an economic system that cannot be controlled and manipulated. So instead of fearing this, we should be celebrating because it's going to give us armor that says we are protected from them doing this to us again, as long as we remain vigilant and as long as we basically go back and understand what it means to be a republic, to be under God's covenant, and we become the nation that God intended us to be, that covenant nation that was under God's covenant with Abraham. It's essential. We can fix the economic system, but if we don't come back and become a moral, God-fearing nation that drops to its knees and gives God credit, heaven help us.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, I want to thank you so much for being with us. Looking forward to what God is going to drop into your spirit next week.
I have no earthly idea.
Oh my goodness. Can you believe that we are almost at the end of February, heading into March, where we're going to march through this victoriously in Jesus Christ's name? I'm looking forward to it. And I know a lot of people are. And just like what you said at the beginning of the broadcast, we're seeing a lot of stuff happening, guys. A lot of stuff happening. So I hope you're prepared. And if you need prayer, don't hesitate to give us a call, text us. We are here for you. Well, bless you, my brother, and bless you, everyone, our family out there. We love hearing from you. So please continue. Again, if you need prayer, let us know. All righty. And hey, I want to leave you with this tag. This is our one of our tags. Join the cause, drink more coffee. That's that's gonna help us get that out there, to the troops. That's one of our plans here. It's a, because Alan's a veteran, our son's a veteran as well in the military, and we have a lot of friends in the military. And what's going on in the border, we need our guys to be focused and alert. So I'll be putting out a little blurb out there when we got the. I don't know. Isn't there, like, instead of a GoFundMe, isn't there a Christian one like Send and Fund or something like that? I'd rather give, glory to
I
that.
don't know, but I bet you there's people watching who can answer that question for you.
Yeah, so I'm sure I'll get, but thank you so much, Larry. All right, guys. Well, God bless you. God bless you, Larry. Have a phenomenal weekend coming up.
You too, Francine. Thank you. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye, everyone.